What I'm holding in my hands is one of my favorite, and I think most underrated books or sets of practices when it comes to mindfulness and spirituality and ultimately happiness. It's called Rewilding, which is all about kind of deepening your connection with nature and bringing nature itself into your psychological and meditative practices. And now I just spent 3 days at a Rewilding Summit and retreat with Micah Mortali, the author of this book, and that's what we're going to learn about in this video. So welcome to the Happiness PhD project with Jackson Kirchis, where I share practical tools from the art and science of happiness to help support happiness for one, that's you, and for all. So as I said in this video, I'll kind of share my experience and why this is relevant to you. And then you'll also learn how you can start, right? How you can try some of this, how you can bring some nature-based meditation or nature-based therapy or almost just nature-based activities into your life in a way that's going to support your mental and even physical health, which we'll talk about some of that research next. So let's start with why. Why nature-based meditation, or what do we even mean when we talk about bringing nature into our meditation or mindfulness or spiritual practice or psychological practice, however you frame that? Well, really what it means is just deepening our connection to nature and trying to use time in nature kind of practically to benefit and cultivate our own health and well-being. And so think about the why first with maybe an analogy. Imagine you had a tiger, or you can pick whatever your favorite animal is, a black bear, an eagle, whatever. But imagine you had a tiger, and you took that tiger out of the jungle where every day it was hunting, it was occasionally running around with other tigers, right? It had its some of its pack, and it was eating fresh meat. It had hundreds of miles to roam. And you took that tiger and you bought a really nice 2-bedroom loft in Manhattan in New York City. And instead of running around playing with other tigers, this tiger got to sit there and be in Zoom meetings all day, with the other tigers and sit in front of a screen and just kind of hang out there. And instead of freshly killed deer and antelope and whatever else, it got to eat some Subway or some sandwiches from the nice little cafe down below. And instead of, again, the hundreds of miles to roam and run around and play and hunt, again, it was sitting in that 200 square foot apartment. I mean, it had really nice view in the apartment though. So what do you think would be first the happiness and well-being of this tiger? And second, what would even be the physical health of this tiger after, a couple months of that, or a couple weeks even? Well, how are we so different from this tiger? I mean, obviously there are some pretty big differences, as you can see, but when you think about how human beings on a biological level evolved, we were out in nature. We were in our tribes, right? These groups, a lot of them family and extended family, but up to maybe 100, 150 people that were literally just with them all the time. We're outside, we're in the forest, we're eating fresh foods that we just killed or harvested, and we're spending our time engaged in these embodied practices going out and hunting or foraging for things or making things with our hands or tracking things. And so you can start to see how really even in just 5 to 10 generations, which from an evolutionary standpoint is not that much time, we've gone from living in that way as hunter-gatherers to more like that New York tiger, right? We oftentimes are relatively isolated in our day-to-day, and we might interact with some people on Zoom or via email. We don't move around a whole lot. We're eating processed, stored food, right? All of these things. And then you wonder why, and I think this actually just happened you can double check me. I'll have to research it after the video, so you can comment if I'm missing something. But I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, for the first time in hundreds of years, human life expectancy started going down, right? It went from nearing 80 to more 77. And we see increased rates of like suicide, drug addiction, mental disorders, metabolic disorders, and chronic physical illnesses. And we're all sort of wondering, well, why is that? And it's like, what would be the most obvious answer with this tiger example, right? And of course, this is not to say like there have been huge advances in like modern medicine. And if I break my leg, I love to be able to go to the doctor. I love being able to have a bed here and central air and heating so that I'm not freezing or super hot, right? There are, of course, benefits, more nutritional availability of certain foods. But we can see how this kind of shift is driving a lot of the challenges facing modern men and women. And so we started to think, well, maybe there is something here of kind of like the healing power of nature. And so you got one there that's sort of maybe a metaphorical. Let's talk about some of the scientific literature on this, and I'll actually throw it up on the video here because I'm going to cheat and look at my notes a little bit. This is from a review published in the Journal of Environmental Health and Preventative Medicine by the author Qing Li on a practice called Shinrin Yoku, which literally just translates to like forest bathing or forest therapy. So this means like intentionally immersing yourself out in nature in a way that's sort of mindful and almost like meditative. Okay, so it's that intentionally carving out that time to be in a natural setting, green space. This practice increases human natural killer NK activity, the number of NK cells, and the intracellular levels of anti-cancer proteins, suggesting a potential preventative effect on cancer. That is insane, right? Shinrin Yoku reduces blood pressure and heart rate, showing a preventative effect on hypertension and heart disease. Shinrin Yoku reduces stress hormones such as urinary adrenaline and noradrenaline and salivary serum cortisol, contributing to stress management. So that was kind of a lot, but right, like your adrenaline, if you think of like an adrenaline rush, and then cortisol, which is a hormone commonly associated with stress, okay, it's reducing the presence of those hormones. Shinrin Yoku, or again, kind of intentional time in nature, increases the activity of the parasympathetic nerves and reduces the activity of the sympathetic nerves to stabilize the balance of the autonomic nervous system. And so parasympathetic, that's kind of like the relaxation and calming response, whereas the sympathetic is more like the active and hypervigilant. And so you can imagine when one goes down and the other goes up, it's leading to a state of relaxation and calm. And then finally, in the Profile of Mood States test, known as the POMS, which, as the name implies, is kind of a measure of like your mood, and it relates to like happiness or depression or anxiety. Shinrin Yoku reduces the scores for anxiety, depression, anger, fatigue, and confusion, and increases the score for vigor and energy, showing positive preventative effects on depression. Kind of stepping back from that very detailed study and review, we can actually look to an article. I think put that down below in case you want to look at the references. This is published by Harvard Medical School, their press, which echoes these benefits, suggesting it can reduce stress, improve immune system function, improve focus and attention, and enhance overall well-being. And, okay, important, all of this is done in as little as 2 hours per week or 20 minutes per day. So it's not like you have to go become a backpacker or spend like your entire weekend hiding in the mountains. Just a little bit of intentional time in nature every day, or for a slightly longer period once a week, you're going to start to see some of these beneficial effects. Having established the importance of this for health and happiness, and again, when I say this, we're talking about like these nature-based practices. Okay, so if you're like into meditation or spirituality or some contemplative practices, okay, this can be trying to bring a connection with nature into those. But even if that's kind of all foreign to you, it could literally just be saying intentionally, okay, I'm going to go out with no distractions, no phones, and spend a couple hours walking through the woods. Okay. And so I'll talk to you now about a little bit of what I experienced at this Rewilding Summit, some of the things I learned about, and then I'm going to give you some tools and guide on how you can go out and try this yourself. Some simple practices around kind of sitting meditation outside, walking meditations outside, some other kind of activities you can do outside, and then how you might try a longer experience, okay? So let's get into that. So when I got to the summit, I sort of, and I'll put this book back up, okay? Rewilding by Micah Mortali. You know, he gets pretty practical and giving you activities and ideas of things you can do. But really the main highlights for me, the first day in the afternoon, we did primitive archery. And so this was like an old-timey longbow like you see in the movies, just like a wooden C shape, okay? And we're shooting that at a target. And you can actually, about to do this, you can buy a longbow on Amazon for like probably $150, which I guess is a little expensive, but like not that bad. And this was really interesting because whether you're doing primitive archery or like any sort of physically embodied skill, it could be making fire. You could go out and try to build a little shelter or like climb a tree or literally like any of these physical activities. Sometimes he refers to them as primitive skills or ancestral skills. These are activities out of doors that help us to like engage our physical body and engage our minds in a way that can be like very meditative and very sort of satisfying because, right, if you can imagine like trying to just walk through nature and your mind's going to be like, oh, what about those emails I have to do? I have to stop at the store and get eggs. I have to do whatever. Like when you're doing this thing, like you're shooting an arrow, okay, it's a lot easier to sort of focus and get in the zone with whatever you're doing. So the first day we learned about the basics of primitive archery, which if you're interested, comment, I can walk you through kind of the techniques and how to do it. But the idea here again is you're almost using it as a form of meditation. And so like I'll briefly show it, I guess, but like you're holding the bow and you kind of exhale, focus on the target. As you draw the arrow back, you breathe in. And then as you look at the target, when you're ready to release, you just exhale. And that whole process, it's almost like yoga or like doing a dance or some sort of ritual. Like you're getting your body involved, aligning it with your breathing, and it's really easy to like calm your mind and focus in on what you're doing. So we did that. The next morning, we did sit spot, which is basically, if you're familiar at all with seated meditation, if you're not, you can check out my channel, I have other videos on that. But the idea is with pretty much any meditation, like you're just sitting down and trying to pay attention to the present moment, which sounds like obvious, right? It's like, no, it's actually quite hard to do nothing and just pay attention because your mind's going to start thinking, oh, I have to do all this stuff. I have to check my email. I have to get my to-do list. I have to go. It's just always going. And the invitation is to just be with that coming and going of all the thoughts and place your attention back on your breathing or just on the experience of the present moment. And so we went out and sort of did a little hike. And then the idea of a sit spot is you do that same practice, but you do it out in nature. Maybe you sit on a log or you bring out a little blanket and sit on that and sit in the woods. You can even do this if you just have like a green space out behind your house. And you may be thinking like, well, what's the point of that? That sounds like just meditation, but it would be more uncomfortable. What you'll find, what I found, is that when you are sitting in that natural environment, it really like pulls your senses into the present moment. And so you're really like, so you can see the blue sky, the green of the trees, or it's winter here, so maybe the brown of the trees, right? But you feel the wind on your face. You maybe even can like smell or taste the fresh air. So it's like pulling your senses into that present moment and almost like expanding your awareness in some weird way and helping to like calm down and relax. So encourage you to try that. The rest of that second day, we did kind of an introduction to nature therapy, which I'm going to do a second video on, which you can find on my channel. That's a little bit more in depth. But again, the idea with that is you go out and again, you kind of go through all your different senses. This can be done on your own or in a group. But you think of like as you're going to step into the woods or into your green space or into that wilderness, almost mentally think of like stepping into a church or into a temple, into sort of a sacred space, even if you're not religious, right? Sacred in like a spiritual way. And once you're in there, you start to go through the senses. What do you see in the woods or in the natural space? What do you hear? Do you smell anything? Can you taste anything? What about touch? Do you feel the wind or the air on your skin? Can you touch a tree or pick up a rock or a stone? And once you've spent maybe 10 or 15 minutes going through each of the senses, you can start to slowly walk. And as you do this, think of expanding your senses, right? Just taking in everything. In traditional yoga, there's actually a name for this state. In psychology, we would probably call it something like absorption, absorption. So you're absorbed in the moment, or flow. In the yoga states, they call it samyama, which means that essentially your awareness is like immersed in the world around you. And there's no kind of separation of thinking about me, and I. And so you can walk that way. And maybe as a final part of this, we were guided through this in our forest therapy session, but we did just kind of some weird stuff that helped us connect with a sense of like playfulness and wonder. And like, for example, we picked up stones and we just explored the stones. We kind of like thought about different uses for our stones. And we ended up even like kind of thinking about like giving a name to our stone and letting our stone guide us on a little walk, which I like is totally out there and weird. And yeah, I don't literally think my stone, I think I called him Rocky, very original, was like telling me where to go. But it was just a matter of like, can you be like a child, right? Can you learn to play or be as creative or as expansive as a child? And so maybe at the end you can do some playfulness there. Okay. Our last day, we did sort of a nature offering, which was kind of weird to me, but again, it felt like there was some symbolism that influenced my psychology on a practical level, right? As opposed to something mystical, which was we had this little cedar tree that they had planted. And he said, okay, to close out this retreat, everyone go off. There was like literally 90 people there. It was kind of crazy. And find a little offering to give to the tree. And I found like a couple acorns, right? And just kind of placed it at the bottom of the tree as a symbol of gratitude to the land and to the universe and just to kind of everything, whatever your creator or your spiritual thing is. And again, it was kind of weirdly powerful, right? And so that's sort of what we went through, right? When we think about rewilding, it can be primitive skills, which we'll talk about in a second, archery, making fire, going out and making a shelter, just playing in the woods, climbing a tree, going fishing, going hunting, whatever, but doing it in kind of an intentional way. Then you have mindful walking or meditation out in a natural space. You have this kind of forest therapy idea, which you can do as well, getting into your senses and doing some kind of play. And then you can also do, again, like some sort of little offering or gesture of gratitude, which again is almost getting into that spiritual side of connecting with nature, because in case you have forgotten, we are not a part of nature or from nature. We are nature. Like we are it. Where did we come from? Okay, and so it's helping you connect in maybe a deeper level. So if you want to try any of this stuff, here's what I suggest. You can always grab this book, which is sort of a reference. He's got a lot of different stuff in here, sort of on like practices, why this matters, okay, how to get more like skills and movement involved, putting it all together. But here is a sort of protocol I would suggest. You find kind of a natural space, okay? And I'm going to give these to you kind of all as one thing, but you can also like segment and just pick various parts of this, okay? So you have sort of a natural space or a green area or a park, right? And you can do this once a day or maybe once a week for a couple hours if you're being more ambitious. You go out and think of, as you step into this natural space, again, it's sort of a idea, but some sort of almost mental gesture of like crossing a threshold. Okay, I'm stepping into this sacred space and this sacred state of mind. Then you may start with, and you can go in either order here, maybe start with the fox walk is what Micah calls it, which means you're going to walk very slow, almost as if you were like hunting or tracking something. And if you are it's nice enough weather and you're in a good spot, try this barefoot. Earlier this year, I actually hiked up a mountain barefoot, which was kind of a long story and it wasn't the best decision, but it just had some interesting qualities to it, a higher degree of attentiveness to the present moment, pulling me into the senses, right? It's hard to have your mind wander when you literally have to pay attention to every step. So barefoot, or what's the opposite of barefoot? Not barefoot. You're slowly walking. And again, remember what I said about samyama, Okay, do this for maybe 20, 30 minutes and just think of trying to absorb yourself into the senses around you. And as you go, you can think through each one. What do I see? What do I see that's moving? What do I see in terms of color? What do I see that's hidden? What am I missing? And then sound. What do I hear? What's the farthest thing I can hear and the closest thing I can hear? What do I smell or taste? What do I touch, starting with my face? Do I feel the wind or the air? Can I touch a tree or touch an object? Okay, so you're getting into your senses as you slowly walk. Then you may try a sit spot, which means to just find a spot that calls to you. And again, ideally you can go back to that same spot a few times a week or something, or every week when you do this, but you want to keep a same spot consistently so that you can sort of see how the forest changes or see how that natural space changes. But you're going to sit there and just do meditation again, maybe up to 30 minutes, and you can swap the order, you can do one or the other. But maybe bring a blanket or a little bench, somewhere where you can sit relatively comfortably in an alert, upright posture and just practice being and taking in that experience of being in that natural environment. And so just right there could be about an hour, and you can even alternate between those two things. And then the last part of this that I would suggest is maybe tie in some element of play or one of these primitive or ancestral skills. And so that might mean literally building a little rock statue. You might say, oh, I'm going to try to just build a shelter, even though you're not going to stay overnight there and it's probably going to suck, right? You can try to build fire, okay? Watch a YouTube video on it first. I'm not going to do a tutorial here in my house on that right now. Get a bow or throw sticks or spear. Like anything that is going to help you to just play and get embodied, right? Use your physical body, actually engage in the physical world. Again, can have a lot of like therapeutic effects, and it's sometimes much easier than trying to just say, okay, well, I'm gonna like sit here on this log and pay attention to my breathing like a Zen master who's enlightened. Like that's really hard. I can't do that. So a lot of different options here, right? Climbing trees, playing, archery, fire, etc. Any of these sort of primitive skills, even just doing some yoga out in the woods, right? If that's more of your thing. Okay. And then finally, whatever this time period is, you may close with some little act of gratitude. Again, knowing that this is symbolic, I'm not trying to turn you into like a pagan nature worshiper, although if that's your thing, that's great. It's just simply saying like, can I do some sort of formal offering or gesture of gratitude to nature because this is who we are. We are not separate from it. It's just giving thanks for being itself. And so maybe you find some object that calls to you and sort of bow to it and place it down somewhere, or make, as one of those primitive skills or activities, make a little altar in nature. Like if you see right there, that's my little like Zen altar. It's got a little Buddha statue, candle, a plant, etc., and a piece of petrified wood. Like whatever you want to do, closing ritual of sorts to communicate your gratitude and then cross out of that, remember that threshold of going into that sacred state or that sacred place, stepping out, and you're done. Okay? And so that is sort of what I learned and how you might start with like kind of a nature-based practice. And look, if you're saying like this video is a little bit weird, yeah, it was a little bit weird. It's a little out there at first, but when you start to like think about how we evolved in terms of our own psychology and the places and states that we are meant to inhabit, it really starts to make a lot of sense that maybe this time in nature would be a very powerful tool for enhancing happiness and well-being. So I hope that you will try some of this. And if you want to go for a longer experience, I mean, you could literally just do a hiking trip, but try to be more intentional about how you're doing it, or a camping trip with, limited your technology. You're trying to be intentional and mindful and almost meditative. And then finally, like you can look up different places. Like I'm probably going to organize one of these retreats this coming year. If you're interested in that, you can comment and I'll keep you updated. You can look up Kripalu, Kripalu, and Micah Mortali. He has experiences there. You can look up Awake in the Wild is another one. You can look up Boulder Zen Center once a year does something. And Animus Valley, although they're a little bit more like out there and kind of weird, but in a cool way. And so there are a lot of different retreat type places that can do this, but you can also, of course, organize it yourself for a couple days, like camping or hiking, but just shifting a little bit, bringing some of these more formal practices and skills into that experience is going to go a long way. So there you have it. Thank you for watching. And as always, I try to share stuff from the art and science of happiness, whether it be psychological studies or experiences like this one. Here's a video that YouTube suggests you'll like. Resources, all the stuff I do is down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.